Babylon was one of ancient history's greatest and wealthiest cities. It was built not on natural assets but by work and ingenuity. It was founded in 2300 BC in Mesopotamia beside the Euphrates River in a dry valley about 60 miles south of Baghdad in present-day Iraq. The area had little rainfall and lacked building materials such as stone and forests for wood. The city exemplified humans' ability to make the most of what was at hand. The only available resources were good soil and water from the river, and Babylonians took advantage of them. Engineers channeled water from the river to grow crops by creating irrigation canals and huge dams. Besides creating the irrigation system, they drained swampland at the mouths of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers for additional cultivation. The city was built of brick made locally and was surrounded by walls and a moat, with a royal palace and a magnificent gate. It may have contained the fabled hanging gardens of Hammurabi and an immense tower to the gods. Besides having some of the earliest engineers, Babylon had mathematicians, astronomers, artists, and financiers. The latter reportedly invented money by using gold as a means of exchange. The city is described in admiring terms by Greek historian Herodotus and others. Babylon was captured multiple times and ruled by a succession of kings, including the biblical king Nebuchadnezzar. The city fell to Persian ruler Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE. Short-form note: Babylon was captured multiple times and ruled by a succession of kings, including the biblical king Nebuchadnezzar. The city fell to Persian ruler Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE. Babylon's ruins were discovered and excavated by a German archaeological team in 1899 to 1917. Clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions were found describing life at the time, including property titles, sales records, and promissory notes. In the 1980s, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein built a $5 million replica of Babylon's royal palace on top of the historic ruins, to the dismay of archaeologists. On some of the bricks, he inscribed, "Built by Saddam, son of Nebuchadnezzar, to glorify Iraq." The ruins suffered further damage in the U.S.-Iraq War. Although the ancient city is gone, the financial wisdom that took root there remains useful. We measure success by money. Those who understand the laws for acquiring money and growing it become rich. The same laws that governed money in ancient Babylon govern it today. Arkad, a fictional character in the Babylonian parables, is described as the richest man in Babylon. Two friends, Bansur and Kabi, a chariot builder and a musician, get tired of working hard to get by without ever improving their status. So, they gather some additional friends and approach Arkad for advice on how to become wealthy. Arkad, who began his working life as a poor scribe, obliges by recommending 7 cures for a lean purse. 1. Pay yourself first. Save 10% of everything you earn, even if you're in debt, to start building wealth. You'll find that you get along just fine on 90% of what you earn, and in 10 years, you'll have saved a year's earnings. To visualize this, think of collecting 10 eggs every day. Each evening, take 9 from the basket to sell and keep 1 for yourself. Eventually, your basket will overflow because you're putting in more eggs than you're taking out. Only the money you consciously set aside is truly yours. You may think all of your earnings belong to you, but when you don't save a portion, you give them to everyone but yourself. For instance, they go to your grocer, your landlord, your shoemaker, and so on. Although you'll be tempted to spend your savings at times, remember that spending brings only temporary gratification, while saving builds long-term wealth and security. And the person who saves part of his earnings will find it easier to acquire more money. 2. Control your spending. After you save 1/10 of your earnings, determine your necessities and create a budget to cover them, plus a few worthwhile things you enjoy, not exceeding the remaining 9/10 of your income. Don't confuse wants with needs. If a pack animal got to choose his burden for a long trip, he'd choose to carry grain, hay, and water, necessities, rather than gold and jewels. Live within your means, or better yet, live below your means. Should your earnings increase, beware of lifestyle inflation, which is the tendency to increase your spending as your income increases. What you define as necessary will always expand to keep pace with your income unless you resist. Remember that the purpose of a budget is to grow your wealth while ensuring that you have the necessities and a few things you enjoy without exceeding 9/10 of your income. A budget shows you the potential leaks in your wallet so you can stop them by maintaining control of your spending. 3. Put your money to work. The money you accumulate from your earnings is just a starting point. You need to put it to work in ways that earn more money by investing it or multiplying it by taking advantage of compounding interest over time. Just be sure you invest wisely with people of honor and experience. When he was starting out, Arkad made a good investment. He loaned money to Agar, a shield maker, whom he knew to be a man who knew his business and paid his debts. The loan enabled Agar to order a large supply of bronze at a good price. When Agar successfully sold all the shields he had made with the bronze, Arkad got back the loaned money plus interest. As Arkad's capital increased, he made more loans and investments, thereby continually increasing his wealth. By investing your money, you create a continuing income stream. Your money is working for you whether you are working, traveling, or retired. 4. Protect your principal from loss. The first thing to do with money you've saved is to protect it. Invest it only where your principal is safe and you can get it back if you want to and where you'll get a fair interest rate. There are many ways to lose money you've saved. You might spend it on wants rather than needs. Family and friends will ask for loans and may not repay them. You might be tempted into making an investment that you haven't researched and that fails to pay off. You might be attracted by a bogus get-rich-quick scheme. For example, Arkad made a poor investment by loaning money to a brickmaker named Asa who was traveling and planned to buy jewels while he was away and resell them at a profit when he got home. He would split the proceeds with Arkad. However, the jewels he bought turned out to be fakes and Arkad lost the money he'd invested to buy them. The lesson he learned is to invest only if the person you're partnering with is experienced in that type of investment. Don't trust a brickmaker to buy jewels. Or invest only with people who are experts in investing money for profit. 5. Own your home. Make your home a profitable investment. By investing your money into buying a home and paying it off over time, you're turning an expense into an asset. Once you own it, you'll reduce your cost of living and you can sell it at a profit if you choose. 6. Plan for retirement. Invest for the future for 2 reasons. 1. If you die prematurely, your family will be provided for, and 2. When you're no longer able to work, you'll have an income. Ways to do this include buying real estate and land that will increase in value and can be sold later, or make other investments. Making small regular deposits with a moneylender bank over time so you keep getting more interest as it grows. Buying insurance. 7. Increase your earning ability. Increasing your income doesn't mean asking for a raise. That makes you dependent on a boss. Instead, take control by investing in yourself. Improve your skills or learn new skills through classes and training. The more you know, the more valuable you are and the more you might make. Also, set goals and work to improve your performance. People who do more and better quality work get paid more. Arkad learned this by noticing that scribes who produced more work received more pay. With practice and effort, he increased his speed and received more money himself. When you manage your finances well, you demonstrate self-respect. Demonstrating self-respect also this includes paying your debts promptly, taking care of your family, making a will, helping others where feasible, learning as much as you can. How Arkad put the principles to work. Arkad was the son of a humble merchant. He didn't inherit wealth or have a sudden streak of luck. Determined to discover the secrets of financial success, he started out working as a scribe in the Hall of Records, recording information on clay tablets. He made barely enough to cover food, clothing, and shelter. Arkad was constantly looking for ways to get ahead, so when a moneylender, Algamish, promised him extra money to complete a big transcription assignment in 2 days, he agreed to do it. But the job was too big and Arkad didn't meet the deadline. Instead, he made a deal with the moneylender. In exchange for instruction from Algamish in how to get rich, Arkad said he'd work all night to complete the unfinished job. Arkad finished the work overnight and asked the moneylender for the secret to accumulating wealth. Algamish's secret was simple. He decided to keep part of everything he earned for himself. He realized that if all of his money kept going to pay bills, he'd never have any for himself and therefore would never get ahead. However, if he set aside a tenth of his earnings, it could earn him more money through interest, which would compound. Wealth is like a tree. The more regularly you water and nourish it, the more it will grow and provide shade, security, for you. Arkad began saving and, to his surprise, didn't miss not having a tenth less available for spending. He resisted temptations to spend his savings on luxuries. At first, he spent the interest he earned on his savings. However, Algamish further advised him to put his money to work by earning more interest on his interest. He also looked for ways to invest. Except for the mistake of investing in the jewels that turned out to be fake, he increased his wealth gradually through wise investments. He had learned to pay himself, live below his means, put his money to work, get competent financial advice. When Algamish saw that Arkad had learned to handle money wisely, he put Arkad in charge of managing his land and other wealth. Arkad increased their value and inherited a share of the estate when Algamish died. Thus, he became the richest man in Babylon. Make your own luck. Nearly everyone dreams of getting lucky, receiving a large amount of money without working for it. Some people hope for luck in gambling. The ancient Babylonians believed luck was bestowed by the gods as they chose. However, Arkad pointed out to his students that no successful person ever credits a windfall from gambling as the start of his success. He credits effort, persistence, and smart decisions. Instead of hoping for luck, look for opportunity. The key is to recognize and seize a good opportunity for increasing your wealth when it presents itself. You make your own luck when you seize good opportunities. The human tendency to procrastinate is your enemy. People are more likely to waffle or delay an investment when they're right than when they're wrong. One way to counter your tendency to waffle is to make a deposit right away. When you're convinced an investment is smart, don't hesitate to make it. Action, not luck, will lead you to success. Arkad addressed several other excuses from his audience for not making the effort to acquire and grow wealth. It takes an unusual amount of willpower to save. Arkad's response: willpower is nothing more than following through on what you set out to do, whether the task is large or small. When you have a habit of following through on tasks, you do the important things and also avoid taking on impractical things that will waste your time. If everyone follows the principles, there won't be enough wealth to go around. Arkad's response: wealth spreads outward like ripples in a pond. For instance, when you invest in building a house, those who provide the bricks and do the construction also benefit because you give them work. It's too late to start now. Arkad's response: it's never too late to start paying yourself. Everything you save begins growing, paying interest immediately. The 5 laws of gold are revealed in a campfire tale by a wealthy camel trader, Calabab. He starts by asking his audience which they would choose: a bag of gold or a clay tablet inscribed with wisdom. Everyone opts for the gold. However, he points out that without wisdom, they just waste the gold and end up back where they started. Gold, or money, he says, accrues only to those who understand the laws governing it. Calabab then explains 5 laws, which he says originated with Arkad, the richest man in Babylon. Arkad passed them on to his son, Nomaser, for whom Calabab once worked. 1. You acquire gold by saving regularly at least a tenth of your earnings to build wealth for a secure future. 2. Gold grows when you invest it along with the interest you receive on it wisely. 3. Your gold will stick around and grow if you follow competent advice from financial experts. 4. You'll lose your gold if you follow bad advice or rely solely on your own judgment when you lack experience. 5. You'll also lose your gold if you succumb to the allure of get-rich-quick schemes or risky investment strategies that promise huge payoffs. How Nomaser learned the laws of gold. When Nomaser became an adult, his father Arkad considered naming him as his successor and putting Nomaser in charge of his estate. However, to first make sure Nomaser wouldn't squander his wealth, Arkad gave him a test: a bag of gold, a tablet containing the 5 laws of gold, and instructions to return in 10 years to report on what he accomplished. This was Nomaser's eventual report. Nomacer first traveled with a caravan to Nineveh where he bet and lost some of his money on a horse race that turned out to have been rigged. Then he invested more of his gold in a partnership with a fellow traveler to purchase a store, but the partner was foolish and the business failed. Out of money, Nomacer sold many of his belongings for food and shelter, and he decided to read the tablet containing the laws of gold. After reading the advice, he was determined to make up for his mistakes. He got a job managing a crew of slaves who were building a city wall and, in accordance with the laws of gold, he saved part of his earnings. His boss noticed his frugality and offered him a solid investment opportunity. Following the third law about heeding competent advice, Nomacer agreed to participate. Realizing that when the city wall was finished, a gate would be needed, the men pooled their resources to purchase metal from distant mines, which they sold to the king for the gate at a profit. Over time, the group joined in other successful ventures after careful analysis, and Nomacer was able not only to recoup his father's money but also to triple it. Arkad was pleased with the return on his investment in Nomacer and entrusted his son with management of his estate. Chapter 4: 3 Parables. This chapter recounts 3 Babylon parables about managing your finances. Think twice before you help. When a friend or family member asks for money, most people will help if they can, even if they have reservations about the wisdom of doing so. But this altruism can often cause new problems, dragging the helper into the friend's predicament. Rodin, a spear maker, found himself with this dilemma. The king had given him 50 gold pieces because he liked Rodin's design for a new spear point for his guards. The payment was far more than Rodin expected to receive. Now his sister wanted him to loan money to her husband so he could open a store. Rodin had doubts about the husband's business acumen. Unsure of how to respond, he asked Mathan, a moneylender, for advice. Mathan replied with a parable about an ox and a donkey. The ox complained to the donkey about having to work hard all day plowing the fields, while the donkey had little to do unless the farmer needed a ride somewhere. The ox was tired and wanted to rest, so the donkey advised him to pretend to be sick the next day so he wouldn't have to work. The ox did this, so the farmer gave him a day off. But meanwhile, the farmer hitched the donkey to the plow and the donkey ended up doing the ox's work. The lesson is, if you decide to help someone, make sure you don't end up taking their problem upon yourself. If you loan money to someone who can't handle it, you might have to step in and do their work to save your investment. Based on his experience as a moneylender, Mathan offered Rodin this additional advice about lending money. Determine whether the would-be borrower has collateral or the earning capacity to pay back the loan. Someone acting under strong emotion is a bad risk for a lender. Someone with a track record of good decisions and prompt repayment is a good risk. A person already in debt is a bad risk. Mathan's final piece of advice on lending was that it's better to be cautious than to suffer regret later. Not willing to risk losing his money, Rodin ended up declining his sister's request. Make sure you're protected. Always take steps to protect yourself against possible setbacks and tragedies in life. In ancient times, the city of Babylon protected its more than 100,000 citizens from enemy attack by maintaining strong walls. This paid off when the Assyrians attacked the city while the king and most of his forces were far away on a campaign against the Elamites. The small force that remained behind to protect the city took heavy casualties, and the enemy's efforts to breach the walls were relentless. For over 3 weeks, the defenders held off the attackers and Assyrian bodies piled up outside the walls. Finally, when dawn broke during the 4th week, city residents saw clouds of dust in the distance as the attackers retreated. The attack was over and the walls had held. People need wall-like protection from the unexpected in many aspects of life. Guard against disaster with wise financial decisions, savings, investments, and insurance. No one can afford to be without protection. Where there's a will, there's a way. Everyone is irresponsible at one time or another. But instead of letting mistakes like becoming mired in debt define your life, you need to find a way to overcome them. Tarkad was a young man who had fallen into debt. One of his creditors was Dabasir, a camel trader whom Tarkad bumped into outside an eating establishment where he was hoping someone would offer him something to eat. Dabasir demanded repayment and Tarkad mumbled something about having a run of bad luck. At that, Dabasir scoffed and hauled him inside, where Dabasir proceeded to eat a large meal without sharing it and launched into a story about how he overcame struggles early in his life and succeeded. Dabasir had been a saddlemaker but spent extravagantly and fell into debt. Fleeing creditors, he went to work in the desert for caravan traders. When he and several others banded together to rob caravans, he was captured and sold as a slave. He became a camel tender for one of his master's wives. Dabasir told the woman he hadn't been born a slave and still had the soul of a free man. She urged him to prove it by finding a way to pay off his debts. While accompanied by Dabasir on a camel trip to visit her mother, the woman gave Dabasir a chance to escape with several camels. He wandered in the desert for days and, at the point of exhaustion, he lay down and considered giving up. But then he had an epiphany that being free meant taking responsibility for your past and future. Eventually, he found his way to Babylon. Resolving to change his life, he went to work for a camel merchant, saved money, and paid back his creditors. The lesson Dabasir told Tarkad was that a man with the soul of slave whines about his problems while a man with the soul of free man solves them. With determination, you can solve financial problems. Tarkad vowed to change his life and Dabasir ordered food and drink for him. Professor Alfred H. Shrewsbury of the Department of Archaeology at Nottingham University in England received 5 clay tablets from the ruins of Babylon excavated by his colleague, Professor Franklin Caldwell. Shrewsbury translated their inscriptions and was surprised to find that they spoke to his own financial circumstances. The tablets contained the story of Dabasir's efforts to pay off his debts. The professor and his wife were deeply in debt, and Shrewsbury seized on the story as a lifeline. It was as follows. Having escaped slavery, Dabasir returned to Babylon determined to pay his debts and become a person of means. He recorded this plan, which was based on the advice of the moneylender Mathan. To provide for his future prosperity, he would save for himself 10% of everything he earned. To provide well for his wife and himself, he would budget 70% of his earnings for food, shelter, clothing, and enjoyment. He resolved to live on this amount and no more. To pay his debts, he would budget 20% of his earnings. Dabasir listed his creditors and how much he owed to each. He visited each one and explained that once a month he would split 20% of his earnings among his creditors until his debts were paid in full. Although some berated him, all of his creditors accepted the payment plan. When the camel business was good, he was able to repay more. When it lagged, he repaid less, but he kept up the schedule. Meanwhile, he saved for himself and stuck to his expense budget. In 12 months, he paid off his debts and gained new stature and respect in his community. Dabasir decided to continue saving and budgeting to build wealth for the future. In a letter to his archaeologist colleague, Professor Shrewsbury reported successfully applying the same principles. Shrewsbury and his wife had become mired in debt and felt hopeless. He worried that his creditors might go public and he'd be forced out of his position at the college. So, following Dabasir's process, he made a list of his creditors and what he owed each of them. He visited them and presented his repayment plan, to which they agreed. By paying himself 10%, he began accumulating money for the first time in years. He invested it wisely so it would grow while living frugally and paying down his debt. He and his wife vowed to never again spend more than 70% of their income. Thus, financial advice thousands of years old proved to be timeless. Sharonada, a wealthy and respected merchant of Babylon, was returning from a trip to Damascus to bring back his late partner's grandson, whom he'd agreed to mentor. The youth, Hayden Gula, was greedy, lazy, and arrogant, and Nada worried that with his spendthrift ways, the youth was destined for a troubled future. So he decided to tell him the story of his partnership with the young man's grandfather, Arad Gula, as a lesson in humility and how to succeed. The youth was shocked when Nada revealed that he'd started his working life as a slave. His brother had killed a friend, and his father bonded Nada to the friend's widow, who decided to sell him. On the way to being sold at a slave market, Nada's fellow slave, Megiddo, advised him to work hard because slaves who did good work were valued by their masters. If you convince potential buyers that you're a good worker, you have a better chance of getting a good master, Megiddo said. Also, good work will bring good things and make you a better person. So, at the slave market, Nada stressed to buyers his willingness to work, and this convinced a baker to buy him. Nada felt he was the luckiest man in Babylon, having escaped the worst fate of working in a wall-building slave gang. Nada became a skilled baker and came up with a way of selling more honey cakes by hawking them in the city's streets in the afternoon. His master let him keep some of the profits, which he saved to one day by his freedom. One of his regular afternoon customers was Arad Gula, who was also a slave and sold rugs for his owner in the streets. Gula was impressed with Nada's enterprise because he, too, believed in hard work and was laboring to earn his freedom. The baking business was going well until the baker fell into debt from gambling and creditors confiscated his property, including Nada, who was put to miserable work building a canal. Nada began to question why he should work hard when things were only getting worse, but he persisted. One day the foreman came and told Nada he'd been ordered to take Nada back to Babylon. When they got there, Arad Gula was waiting for him and purchased his freedom. Gula had purchased his own freedom earlier and then searched for Nada so the two could become business partners. For both of them, work and saving money were the keys to freedom and financial success. The youth, Hayden Gula, was impressed with the story of his grandfather's and Nada's perseverance, which he vowed to emulate so he, too, could be a successful and honored man. As he and Nada approached the city of Babylon, he dropped back in the caravan and rode behind Nada as a sign of respect.